Good day, everyone. Welcome again to another lecture in personal development. So, for today, we are going to talk about Module 8, which is all about emotional intelligence. Let us first look into the nature of emotions, how and why they occur, and what are their effects on us. In the best-selling book written by Daniel Goleman entitled Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ, the author presented the physiological process on how emotions occur. According to him, that all emotions are in essence impulses to act, the instant plan for handling life that evolution has instilled in us. By this, Goleman traces the origins of emotion from human race's survival instinct to sense, detect, assess, and act on any threat to its life and survival. This instinct is also known as the flight or fight or freeze response that animals and humans alike are capable of doing when faced with danger. As humans and animals in general have this instinctive nature for survival, it is only the human brain that was gifted with the capacity to process on an intellectual level the emotions being experienced, validating the reality of the danger, controlling the emotions being experienced, and acting accordingly given several options to choose from. Neuroscientists have agreed that there are parts of the human brain primarily involved in the creation of emotions, specifically the amygdala, the neocortex, and the frontal lobes. According to neuroscientist Dr. Joseph Ledoux, the amygdala has become the center of action, the emotional sentinel that can take control of our actions even before the neocortex could assess what to do. This means that the amygdala tells us what to do even though the stimulus has not yet been processed thoroughly. The amygdala also keeps a memory bank of previous experiences related to emotions. This memory may even go way before us and is imprinted in our genetic codes. As an example, if we see a snake in front of us, its image is quickly passed on to the thalamus, which in turn sends out the pulses to the other parts of the brain. First into the neocortex, which is termed as the thinking brain, then to the amygdala, then to the frontal lobes, which eventually send the signals to the other parts of the body for action. Now we define emotional intelligence. This is the ability to motivate oneself and persist in the face of frustrations, to control impulse and delay gratification, to regulate one's mood and keep the stress from swamping the ability to think, to empathize, and to hope. I know this is a lot to take in, but let's divide the definition part by part. First, we have the ability to motivate oneself and persist in the face of frustrations. This refers to the capacity to be resilient. That means not giving up easily, finding ways to keep pushing and moving forward toward your goals even though what you're doing and experiencing is quite frustrating sometimes. Another, it is also the ability to control impulse, which means not acting impulsively, but rather you take a moment to reflect before doing something. Also, we have delayed gratification, or this is also called deferred gratification. It is the act of resisting an impulse to take an immediately available reward in the hope of obtaining a more valued or greater reward in the future. The ability to delay gratification is essential to self-regulation or self-control. It pays to learn how to wait, and it pays to learn how to be patient in your day-to-day lives. And the other part is to regulate one's mood and keep the stress from swamping the ability to think, to empathize, and to hope. And we will discuss this part on the next slides. While it was Daniel Goleman who popularized emotional intelligence, the concept of emotional intelligence was first introduced by Peter Salovey, a psychologist from Yale University who showed how intelligence can be brought to our emotions. Later on, Salovey was joined by John Mayer, a psychologist from the University of New Hampshire, in formulating emotional intelligence. So these are the proponents of emotional intelligence. Peter Salovey identified 5 domains of emotional intelligence. First of it is knowing one's emotions or self-awareness. It is about recognizing one's emotions and being able to verbalize it. For example, by saying, I am experiencing anger or I am angry. This is also about how we feel or the thought behind the feeling. Self-awareness brings with it the skill of reflection. According to Mayer, when one recognizes this emotion, there is also a desire to get rid of it or get out of that situation. So that is the first domain, knowing one's emotions or self-awareness. The second domain is managing emotions. Goleman points out that we often have very little or no control when an emotion occurs and what this emotion will be. But in emotional intelligence, a person must have control over his or her emotions on how long would it last. For example, when we grieve over the loss of a loved one, to dwell on the grief for a very long time will oftentimes result in deeper emotional problems such as depression. It is important to recognize an emotion and experience it, but dwelling on it, particularly if it's negative, is not healthy. That is why it is important for us to manage our emotions. The third one is motivating oneself. So motivating oneself deals about encouraging oneself and staying optimistic. Hope is a major indicator of emotional intelligence, and optimism is also a great motivator. And like hope, it provides a person with expectations that things will turn out better or right when faced with adversity. So there are really times in our lives that we face circumstances, we face uncertainties, but with this domain, it tells us that we have to think of the positive things. We have to look at things on a positive way, on a brighter perspective, that even though we are experiencing something bad right now, it won't last and things will turn out better in the end. Since hope is an indicator of emotional intelligence, let's talk about Dr. Alan Bernardo's locus of hope theory. This theory talks about pathways or avenues in improving or enhancing our individual or personal levels of hope. First, we have internal. So in Western setting, people are very individualistic. If they want to feel hopeful or feel good, they will look at their own abilities. They will think of their positive personal characteristics and they would say, I can do it because I know that I work hard for it. So even in our country, in the Philippines, there are times that we look on the good things and the positive things that we have or we possess, and that's how we encourage ourselves. That's how we stay hopeful. However, most of the time in our setting here in the Philippines, we are very collectivistic. That's why in motivating ourselves, it is important to us to know and hear what other people would have to say about our capabilities. That's why in the locus of hope theory, it was identified that there are 3 more sources of hope, which are all external. That includes the family, our peers or our friends, and our spiritual aspect also. So you does not only get hope, or we do not only get hope from ourselves, but also we get hope from our family members especially. That's why it is important that we get support from them, especially on our endeavors. Our friends also, or our peers, play an important role in enhancing our level of hope. The last one is the spiritual locus of hope. As Filipinos, when we are faced with adversities, we reach out to God in order for us to feel hopeful about the future. The fourth domain of emotional intelligence is recognizing emotions in others. When this involves being empathic, or when we say empathy, it is the capacity to recognize emotions in other people. According to Goleman, the root cause of our capacity to empathize is self-awareness. If we recognize our emotions and how these affect us, then it will be easier to recognize other people's emotions. Empathy is important in maintaining relationships as this also taps on the caring capacity of people. Empathy is something that we need to cultivate because if we are empathetic towards someone, sometimes that's enough for the person to feel accepted. To be empathic does not only mean to be there for the person, but also letting the person know that you are trying to understand what he or she is feeling. It's not comparing your circumstances because we have different circumstances in life, but allowing that person to know that whatever he's feeling or she's feeling is normal, especially with his or her circumstances. That would not only help that person in establishing or that would not only help you in establishing good relationship with that person, but it will help that person on the aspects of his mental health as well. Emotional intelligence is also evident in the way we manage our relationships with others, and that is the last and fifth domain, handling relationships. Howard Gardner, the proponent of the multiple intelligences, and his colleague Thomas Hatch came up with four components of social intelligence or the interpersonal intelligence, which includes organizing groups, negotiating solutions, personal connection, social analysis. So organizing groups entails leadership skill, essential in mastering groups of people toward a common action. Examples of people with this talent are those orchestra conductors, stage directors, among others. When we speak of negotiating solutions, this capacity to bring people in conflict to talk and come up with a solution is usually found among mediators of disputes. The next one is personal connection. This is the ability where empathy and connecting with another person's emotions are manifested. Teachers usually have this natural tendency to relate to others. And the last one is social analysis. It is the ability to step out of a situation and objectively from insights about the way people feel and behave. So most people or people who have this ability or capacity are those of therapists and others. Now let's talk about a related concept, the Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence, which suggests that there are various types of intelligences, not just intellectual. There are various areas that a person can be competent. So this theory would help us realize that a person can be intelligent in a number of ways, and in relation to your emotional intelligence, that would be very helpful in various aspects of your life, particularly in establishing good relationships with others and even with yourself. Now let's talk about the variances of emotions. A psychologist who developed one of the most popular emotion wheels known as the Plutchik wheel of emotions, who is Plutchik, Robert Plutchik, he theorized that emotions are multidimensional or having various intensities, that people experience 8 core emotions which he arranged in opposite pairs on the wheel that include sadness and joy, anger and fear, anticipation and surprise, trust and disgust. Each of these 8 basic emotions have varying intensity, starting with the most intense at the center of the circle, with the most intense colors to the least intense emotions within the category. So here is the Robert Plutchik's wheel of emotions. So according to the theory, or according to Plutchik, he arranged these emotions, these variances of emotions in different intensities. So for example, we have here under the category of joy, the most intense is ecstasy, and when the color also fades, or the intensity of the color um, diminish, so that means that it is the most or the least of the category. Another is grief. We have sadness, and the most intense is grief. So that is the wheel of emotions according to Robert Plutchik. On the other hand, Daniel Goleman also refers to 8 main families of emotions and their corresponding members. First, we have anger, and its members include fury, outrage, resentment, wrath, exasperation, indignation, vexation, acrimony, animosity, annoyance, irritability, hostility, and its extremes, hatred and violence. Another is sadness, which includes members: grief, sorrow, cheerlessness, gloom, melancholy, self-pity, loneliness, dejection, despair, and in extreme, depression. Next, we have fear, which includes anxiety, apprehension, nervousness, concern, consternation, misgiving, weariness, qualm, edginess, dread, fright, terror, and in extreme, phobia and panic. Another family of emotion is enjoyment, which includes happiness, joy, relief, contentment, bliss, delight, amusement, pride, sensual pleasure, thrill, rapture, gratification, satisfaction, euphoria, whimsy, ecstasy, and its extreme, mania. The next one is love, which includes acceptance, friendliness, trust, kindness, affinity, devotion, adoration, infatuation, and agape. Another family of emotion is surprise, which includes shock, astonishment, amazement, and wonder. Next family of emotions is disgust, which includes contempt, disdain, scorn, abhorrence, aversion, distaste, and revulsion. The last one is shame, which includes guilt, embarrassment, chagrin, remorse, humiliation, regret, mortification, and contrition. So those are the 8 families of emotions according to Daniel Goleman. So we will end this lecture through this statement by Jay Friedman. According to him, emotional intelligence is a way of recognizing, understanding, and choosing how we think, feel, and act. It shapes our interactions with others and our understanding of ourselves. It defines how and what we learn. It allows us to set priorities. It determines the majority of our daily actions. And research suggests it is responsible for as much as 80% of the success in our lives. So again, just to give you a recap, rather, emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, assess, and understand one's emotions and manage them accordingly, resulting in positive physical and mental health, excellent work performance, and healthy interpersonal relationships. There are 5 domains of emotional intelligence: self-awareness, self-management, motivation, empathy, and social relationships. So in order to develop one's emotional intelligence means to become honest and open to oneself, accepting one's capacity for different types of emotions, and knowing how to handle emotions positively, and being empathic and sensitive to other people's emotions. So I hope you have learned something out of this lecture. Stay well and stay safe, everyone. God bless you.